Well, hi everybody. I love bread. Almost any form: rolls, croissants, cinnamon, sourdough bread, French toast. Not really French, but I love it anyway. Baguettes also would have been a great name for a late 50s women's R&B group. Cheesy bread, bagels, English muffins, cornbread, is it really bread? And brioche, which we all know was named after a piece of jewelry. Of course, bread's best when it's freshly baked and still warm. Are you hungry yet? Well, it's interesting that Jesus termed himself the bread of life, among other descriptions, but we'll stick with the bread for today. Why did Jesus use bread as a personal descriptor? Well, it's likely that Jesus, knowing that bread was made pretty much every day in a typical Jewish family, and of course vital to actually sustaining life for them, he knew his listeners would get the connection. In fact, some of you know the Lord's Prayer. What does it say? Give us this day our daily bread. Yep, they knew what that was about in the Jewish culture. The city name, Bethlehem. Of course, the place where Jesus was born means house of bread. The point? Well, like their bread that's needed for physical life, Jesus, his spirit, his guidance, his living in them would be needed for life in the spiritual, emotional, and eternal world. See, he said, whoever eats of this bread will live forever. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. In other words, his death and resurrection offered the way, the truth, and the life. That's the only way to God and eternal life, and that's still true today. You see, bread and water are the most basic foundational parts of any diet that will keep people alive and well. In fact, both terms were used of Jesus. We've already talked about the bread one. He's also called the living water. And thankfully today, many, many more are coming to realize that. See, some people have suggested that, well, because Jesus used an analogous description of eating his flesh, John 6:53, that he was making some sort of cannibalism a requirement to follow him. No way. See, first, there's never been any other writings, examples, or testimonials of that. But more importantly, it's an understandable way, as I've already said, for the Jews and others of that time period to get the bigger picture of his being the bread of life. See, bread has to be eaten to be of any good, and Jesus is the bread. And if people don't partake of him, they won't have eternal life, not only now, but forever. In fact, bread was also part of Jesus overseeing the Last Supper. The bread was there used to represent his body, which would be horribly broken in punishment for us. But it's our ongoing reminder of what he did. It was that brokenness that gives us life today if we'll just receive him, what he did on the cross for us. And we'll eat, so to speak. And then, we drink the wine or the juice representing the blood. And see, what we have is those two elements today. We have them in whole form when we take communion. A reminder that he didn't just die, but he came back to life. So I hope you like bread as much as I do, but if you don't do or you don't, too bad. Remember that there's one kind of bread that you do need, we all need, which will one day fill us up and we'll never need more as we do of earthly bread these days. And we can also let go of some of the other breads that we long for and think we have to have, rather than we can just enjoy them for what they are. They're maybe good and desirous, but they'll never fully satisfy. Jobs, relationships, successes, applause may all be enjoyable, but they can't bring ultimate eternal joy. See, we'll always need and want more. Want to get more of God's bread? Then get more of Jesus. Invite him into your life. Read the Bible, which explains from cover to cover who God, Jesus, is and how to keep living and eating the right things. The Bible is also part of God's food for us. And maybe when you do have today's bread here on earth, you'll think for just a minute about how good it is, but how much better God's bread, Jesus, and his word are. Maybe there's a spiritual analogy for bread pudding. Nah. Talk to you next time.